What's up, sister?
What's up? How are you?
Sister, what does Charlamagne say? I'm blessed, black, and highly favored. How are you?
I am all of those things as well. And that's funny. Charlamagne is saying that now.
Yeah, he is.
Okay. He's interesting. He's interesting, to say the least.
He is definitely a provocative individual. You know what else is provocative?
What's that?
Black stories.
Yeah.
I think black stories, they provoke conversation, they provoke action, and they provoke incredible experiences. And my sister, you have a hell of a story. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would. Yes, because sometimes it feels very much like if this wasn't my life, I would be cracking up right now.
Wow. And you laughing right now?
Yeah, I mean, humor is the key for me. Like, I realized that I think even more last year with everything that was going on, I just realized that humor is the lens through which I make sense of certain things. Yeah, so I go there often.
I ain't mad at it.
I can always find something to laugh at.
And sister, we're gonna laugh a lot today. We're gonna laugh a lot today.
Sounds
So
good.
before we get into it, introduce yourself. Tell us what's your name for the people that's listening.
Yes, so I am Ebony Chappel. I am a Naptown girl all around. Grew up on the west side in Hallville. Graduated from Ben Davis High School, and then I went to Ball State University before moving back to Nap to go ahead and get my career started.
Oh, that's good. That's good. And I appreciate you for your time because I know you got a lot going on between running shows, being an advocate for our community, being a storyteller, being a leader in the city in both corporate and communal capacities, thebomb.com. And I don't know if we could have our inaugural season, our pilot season of Naptown Narratives with having a voice like yours with such an incredible story. And for me, that leads us to our first official question. If you could describe the city in 3 words, 3 words,
Okay.
what would they be and why?
If I could describe Indianapolis in 3 words, I would use, let's see. I would, from my perspective, I would use the word promising. I think this city shows a lot of promise. I think that Indianapolis is a interesting place. I know that's a very basic word to use, but I think there's a lot of interesting situations going on that can be pretty complicated. So the last word I use is complicated.
Promising,
So, yeah.
interesting, and complicated.
Yep. Promising, interesting, and complicated.
Well, that's good. That's good. I don't think we've heard those before, have we? I don't think so. Why am I asking people that? Like they go, I'm a comedian. I'm a comedian. But that's good though. That's good.
Yeah.
So you said you're from the west side of the city?
Yes. Yep. Born and raised on the west side.
And you talked about these 3 different words you used to describe the city. Something that we like to do during these conversations is get people to be very intentional about the words that they use, right? And I don't know about you, I'm not from the west side, I'm from the east side. But growing up and even now, I hear people refer to the city in different ways. So there's people who know Indianapolis, there's people who know Indy, but then there's people who know about Nap, right, in Naptown. Do you think those are 3 different terms?
I absolutely think that they're different terms. I think that that's what makes it interesting and complicated, is because you can live in a city all of your life and depending on the environment that you're in, the circles that you're a part of, you can experience it in a way that is completely different from someone else, from a different side of town, a different socioeconomic background. It's just, and they're all these experiences are running concurrently, but it really frames how people see the city as a whole. So yeah.
No, for sure. But you called yourself a Naptown girl at the start.
Yeah.
And I think that Nap will consider you the same. Can you kind of talk about why you love Naptown so much?
Yeah, so the reason why I lean into that identity as opposed to saying Indy or Indianapolis is because I always want to center for myself the fact that Indy is a Black city, and a lot of us Black people call it Naptown. And also that word or that moniker has been used negatively by some people to mark the city as a place that's sleepy, that's behind the times, where there's not a lot going on. But I know that that's not the case. When I look around and I see some of the great innovations that are being made by people in my community, both past and present, it lets me know that like nobody's asleep here. Like we're really making things happen. It's just that the rest of the world needs to wake up to us. So that's why I lean into that one.
Ebony Chappel, can I ask you a question?
Yes, you can.
I've heard some things in the streets, the rumblings, about something called Indie Urban Warrior. Can you kind of talk about what that is and why it's important to you and your story and your legacy here in the city?
Yeah, so Indie Urban Warrior, so that name Urban Warrior came from a woman named Nas Khalid, who is an amazing musician and sound healer and an educator who was a big part of the Naptown art scene when I was coming up. And she, used that name towards me, so I just ran with it. Because for a long time I was a pedestrian. Long story short, I got my license suspended for failure to pay some tickets, and I had to go through that whole system. And this is not a criminal justice discussion, so I'm not gonna get on my soapbox with that, but long story short, we need changes when it comes to that. So anyways, I was like, okay, my life is riding the bus now. Like, let me try to navigate this. And at that time, this was pre-red line, pre-purple line, blue line, all of that. So it was a little more complicated. And people would always ask me these questions like, how do you even catch the bus? Like, how do you know what time it comes and this and that, whatever. So I started like educating people on like, this is how I use the bus to get around. So I would do that, and then I would post stories with that hashtag Indie Urban Warrior on my social media just to talk about stuff that would happen when I rode the bus. And I started a blog where I talked about that on Tumblr, and I still keep it up to this day, but it has transitioned to me taking pictures when I'm out and about, like either walking or riding my bike. And one of the things that I've noticed a lot recently is a lot of street art speaking out against gentrification. So I have used that platform to kind of just highlight these pictures, because when you're in a car, we're such a car heavy city. When you're in a car and you're driving and stuck in traffic on Meridian or whatever, you don't notice these things around you. But when you get out and you put your feet on the ground and you start walking around, you get to really, really see the city in a totally different light. So that's where that Indie Urban Warrior came from. And it's been really cool so far, just chronicling the different things that I noticed being on foot or being on my bike, which I call Peacock. So yeah, it's been pretty cool.
Well, thank you for sharing, sister.
Thank you for asking.
Something that's unique about your story is that you've seen the city in a number of different seasons, right? Because right now, some say that we're in the middle of a renaissance. But there's a season that precedes a renaissance, and there's one that comes once it's finished. And you've seen so much, right? And so, but you still love the city, And so I wanted to know if there was a story that you might be able to tell or recall for the people that speaks to why you love this city so much.
Yeah. So I think a story that encapsulates the reason why I love this city so much, I can just talk about what I did this past weekend. So I grew up here, born and raised here, went to school here. When I came back from college, I worked a lot of odd jobs, so I was able to see the city from a lot of different unique perspectives. One, working in hospitality, being somebody that, worked in the community, still do work in the community, and then becoming a person that worked at, large institutions in the city as well. So in that, it's made my community very broad and given me a chance to experience the city in a lot of different ways. So this past weekend was really one of those great experiences where I got to see the city that I love in the way that I love to enjoy it. So I started out Sunday morning, got up early, and I drove over to Belmont Beach, which is a pop-up park that I helped develop with some friends of mine over on the west side. So got up early and we took a nature trail hike. And when you try to explain that to people that there are nature trails in Hallville, they're like, what, where? Like, I've never heard of that. I didn't know that was a thing. And it is. It's one of the more beautiful trails in the city. It's new, so there's still a lot of work that has to be done. But we got to walk through and see where, rare trees and herbs grow wild right there in Hallville, medicinal herbs. We saw animals, all types, birds, the water. We got to walk alongside the water and talk about the fish and everything. So to know that there's basically a nature preserve in the neighborhood that I grew up in was just like mind-blowing. So then I left there and I went over to the Flanner House, which for people that don't know, the Flanner House was an institution that was created over a century ago to help support Black people that were migrating north from other places that didn't have access to food, employment, housing, etc. The Flanner House was the place that they went back then to get help and support. And it is still that place to this day where people can go and receive all sorts of help and support. So when I showed up Sunday morning, I walked into, there's a plot of grass that is in between their farm where they harvest vegetables to feed the community and a bookstore where Black authors in the city sell their books and people come to learn and read and use the computers and everything. And then there's a plot of grass right there in the middle. And I took a self-defense class with people from my community teaching me a form of self-defense that they had developed themselves through years and years of research. So I did that with a group of women and it was just a beautiful experience. Left there, went back to Belmont Beach where I got to see a performance by Kenyete Dance Company, which is a Black dance company, an artistic organization here in the city, been around for 15 years. And they performed these beautiful, dances right there on a stage in the woods by the river. And we're sitting out there with people of all different, backgrounds, walks of life, different races, just enjoying the beautiful weather and listening to the music and seeing them dance. Before I left, I got to talk to Mr. Anthony Artis, or Tony Artis as people may know him, who is a legendary percussionist known all over the world and a leader in African spiritual tradition, and got to talk to him about different programs he's getting ready to offer to the community and some of my other friends that were there. So it was just a beautiful experience. Left there, went to go take skating classes with a friend of mine because we have an amazing skate culture here in Indianapolis that people may not be aware of, but I was raised up going to the skating rink all the time, so I'm familiar with that. So took that class, left, went to Garfield Park for Jazz Fest, where I got to see some of the top jazz performers in the world on the stage at Garfield Park, which is not far from my backyard. And this was some of their first time performing in 2 years because of the pandemic. And Naptown was the first place on their list, which is, for me, a full circle moment, considering the fact that jazz music, as we have come to understand it as a staple of, American artistic output, a lot of those musicians that started that, they cut their teeth right here in Indianapolis. So to see some of the top performers in the world come back, and Naptown was top of their list of places that they had to be for me, I was just like, this is perfect and this is always the way that it was supposed to be. So being able to experience things like that and it not be a huge barrier to access, it's right there, it's accessible. These are my friends and my family and people that I connect with that I'm able to learn from, patronize, and support. And to do that all in one day in my city is just incredible. And those are the reasons why I love Indianapolis, or love Naptown rather.
You see, so one, you just broke that down beautifully. You know, it was like a poem. It was like one long poem. And you broke it down beautifully, and it sounded like a poem because it came from your heart.
Yeah.
You felt it all. But something that you and I both know is that people will still say there's nothing to do here in the city.
Yeah. That happens a lot. And you know, I think that a big part of it is because the city with a big C, like the institution, has not supported enough these initiatives that I just mentioned. You know, we can have some amazing events going on here. If you turn on your local mainstream news or you try to see, you know, what the city has put out, you know, information about, a lot of times they don't support the things that everyday folks are doing. So it's easy to think there's nothing going on, there's nothing here for me, because the institution, big C city, doesn't always support that the way that they should. Also, Indianapolis is a place that has been plagued by segregation, and that is something that's not talked about a lot. There is a reason why we do not have a hub or an area, a neighborhood, a strong place where people can go and say, this is always a place that I can go to experience Black culture in the city. Everybody is so siloed, and you have to really know what you're looking for in order to be able to find it, because of segregation, because of lack of resources for people to be able to promote themselves properly, and lack of support from the city. So I totally get why people think there's nothing going on here. And I wish that it was easier to get access to, but the one thing that I'll tell people is, if you're really serious about being engaged in the city and engaged in your community, you have to take the initiative to step out there and to find out what's going on and figure out a way to be a part of it.
No, that's exceptional. You're right, it takes a level of, there's a certain responsibility that you gotta take. There's a certain accountability you have to take, but it's all rooted in an intention.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people don't want to see the city that way for a number of different reasons. Because you're right, there's a lot of triumph in the city, but there's a lot of trauma too. Just like it is to be Black anywhere in these divided states of America. You see a blend of both, and this city's not exempt from that. And so the next thing I want you to speak to is, if you had to talk to somebody right now, somebody that's listening, they're like, you know what, forget the city, I'm going to Atlanta, I'm going to Chicago, I'm going to New York, I'm going to Miami, I'm going to LA. If you had to speak to them right now and tell them a reason why they should stay, what would you say?
So for people that are contemplating leaving and going to whatever big magical place, what I would tell them is, if that's where you want to go, you know, be my guest. However, Indianapolis is a place where I've been able to see a lot of my dreams come true. And I'm not the only one. You know, my story is not a unique one in that regard. I know a lot of people that have had the same exact experience, because throughout, you know, time, this city has had a lot of issues, you know. But one thing that has remained constant is the ability to really make it what you want it to be. This is a place that is, it's wide open. You are less than a couple of degrees of separation away from anything it is that you want to do. It may not seem like it, and I think that that is part of the issue that people run into, is because it seems like there's so much in between you and what you want to accomplish, in between you and that person that you want to get connected with. It can seem like that, but I feel like that is an illusion. Because from my experience, what I've had happen is a lot of people are very open to connecting. Going back to that word you used before, intention. if your intentions are right and your intentions are on being collaborative and being a team player and supporting other people in addition to wanting to gain support, you're gonna get what it is that you need. We have people that have gone on to do so many great and wonderful things, and they've been based right here. We've also had people that have moved back. We have a New York Times bestseller that decided, I'm gonna make Indianapolis my home. She could live anywhere in the world, you know, but decided to make Indianapolis her home. I think about friends of mine that are accomplished chefs and accomplished business owners, and they've decided to make Nap their home and, you know, really build their empires from here. So this is a place where anything is possible, but you just gotta be willing to put yourself out there to make it happen.
No, for sure. And you have already spoken to, at least in part, the second to last question I want to ask you. You know, so we've discussed people who are from the city, of the city, thinking about going to some other magical place, and you talked to them about the magic that's inside of Indianapolis.
Yeah.
But what about the person who's never experienced the magic of Indianapolis, that's coming from the New York, that's coming from the Miami, from the Chicago, from the LA, and they're like, you know, I'm thinking about moving, and Indianapolis, for whatever reason, is on my list. What's the selling point? What do you tell them to say, this is why you gotta pick this city?
Yeah. I think my selling point would be the thing that I just mentioned, the fact that Indianapolis is a place where anything is possible. We have a lot of things going for us. At one point in time, we were known as the crossroads of America. Like, there's a reason for that. Not to mention, you know, the cost of living is nothing to sneeze at. So I would encourage them to take advantage of that as well. And then I also think the fact that, you know, when you look at some of these other places, you can end up being a small fish in a big pond. Whereas Indianapolis, I think that this is a pond that has enough room for all the fish to swim. So if you are looking for a place to be able to really build community with people and be able to make things happen, I think this is a perfect place to do it.
Oh, that's fire. And that's coming from a big fish. That's coming from a big fish.
I'll accept that with all humility. I try not to, you know, think about myself that way, but yeah.
No, but I mean, that's why this platform exists. Because you're right. I think another thing that you're taught within the city is just that. Like, we move with a sense of humility, and we call it selflessness, but oftentimes it's rooted in insecurity.
I've heard that before.
Yeah, and not insecurity that we have, but the idea of when you walk into the room with someone who's from Chicago or from New York or from LA, you from Indy. So don't overstep your boundaries, because they'll check you in a second, as if I'm not coming with something that nobody else has.
Yeah. Which I definitely think that speaks to the whole like Midwestern, more like humble and very meek perspective. And I do see where that could be a problem for sure. I think for me, the way that I was raised up is just to like be about it as opposed to talk about it. So I think that kind of informs my perspective when it comes to that. Is, you know, I come from a town where people work real hard and they stay committed to things. Like, if they say they're gonna do something, you know, they stick through it and they make it happen. And then we get to celebrate on the back end, but we don't make the braggadocious, you know, thing such a big part of it. So, but yeah, I think that we need to, you know, flaunt our shit a little bit more. Like, we need to be more outspoken about the things that do make us great, so that people don't get it confused. But yeah, I think that's a good point.
And when people see you, they can't get it confused, you know, because your record stands the test of time. You didn't wake up yesterday and start. You didn't wake up yesterday or the day before yesterday and start. You know what I'm saying? You've been doing this, and you're nowhere near stopping.
Not
right?
at all.
And your peak is not even in sight, and the people need to recognize. So, considering all of that, the city's listening. You know, what's the last thing you have to say? Your final words for this episode?
Yeah. My final words for this episode, I would say I love my city. I want the best for my city. I think that Indianapolis is in a good position to be a national and a global leader when it comes to how we treat our communities and how we support the marginalized. I would love for this city to really take up the mantle of making everyone succeed, making it an equal and level playing field so that all people can live well, all people can have living wages and safe, affordable housing and great education for their children and be able to make all of their dreams come true. I really think that that's where we could go in the future, but it's gonna take all of us doing our part to make that happen.
Thanks for doing your part, sister.
Thank you. Thank you for doing your part.
It's love. That's done. Cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching.
Our stories, our legacy, our city.
With the drip, put your city on the map. Make a flip off the rip on my own. Double back, too legit. With the drip, put your city